IVM.
This is Audio Gyan, and I am your host Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world. Welcome to a brand new series of Audio Gyan, Where Are the Designers? It's a 12-part series featuring few of the top influential design leaders in India, talking about the process of hiring, challenges in finding and retaining talent, and some tips for young designers to make a cut. I'm so happy and proud to introduce my co-host for this series, Abhineet Tiwari. He works at Gojek. Hey, Abhineet, welcome back.
Hey Kedar, happy to be here again.
How's it going?
All good, all good. Hanging in here. Really looking forward to talking to Rahul today.
Yes.
Yep. I
Yeah,
guess, you can start with this introduction.
yeah. Today we have Rahul Gonzalez with us on AudioGAN. Rahul is one of the faces of New India, as Forbes called him. Rahul is a co-founder of Obvious, a full-stack design and tech studio who empowers companies to build great products and solutions. I don't have much introduction, thanks Rahul for giving your time, and it's a real pleasure to have you on AudioGAN.
It's great to be here, Kedar. I think great to be here talking to both you and Abhineet.
Yeah. It's been quite some back and forth to schedule this, thanks for coming and joining in. So basically, the premise is about where are the designers. But before we begin, I think I'll start with we have a rapid fire round for this series. And these questions are not scripted for the listeners, neither for the guests. So we'll start with this. Are you ready for the rapid fire round?
No, but let's go ahead anyway.
Okay. Okay, your favorite, and then these questions are really random in no order and just random questions. So
This is just warm up.
yes, just to get used to it. Yeah. Your favorite bicycle brand?
I'm going to have to go with the first bicycle I owned, which was a Trek.
Okay. Why do you sleep so early?
Exhausted by the cares of the day.
Okay. And then what time do you generally wake up?
Reluctantly, I wake up at 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning.
Good. Okay. Now this is going to be a tricky one. Your most pain in the ass client?
Are you trying to get us fired here?
No comments is acceptable, but should be the last recourse.
Yes.
Well, I think the most difficult clients I've had have also been some of the most rewarding to work with. I think I'm going to single out two, right? Or actually two people and one client. So this is way back, I think probably the first mobile app I ever designed. And actually, I think possibly one of the first mobile apps in India. So I was at Flipkart, or I was helping Flipkart out. And I was introduced to two people who joined about a few weeks or a month ago, who were in charge of their digital platform. So Flipkart in 2012 was trying to build a digital music and ebook downloading service called Flight.
Yeah.
So I meet these two people who were leading the effort, full of life, full of opinions, and very, very competent at what they did. And possibly the only clients with whom I have had a physical fight on the floor of the, on the office floor, right? Where we, caught each other's collars, yelled things at each other, all because they wanted buttons at one color and I wanted to keep within the overall theme that had gone so far, right?
Wow.
Anyway, long story short, that particular product, it was called Flight. We launched it, became really popular, not successful, failed, died, and, went out of existence. It was only later that Flipkart actually built their own mobile app. The two gents who were spearheading that effort are today extremely famous. Two chaps called Rahul Chari and Sameer Nigam. They now run a small startup called PhonePe.
Small startup called PhonePe. Great, man. Great. Your longest bicycle ride?
My longest bicycle ride was halfway to Mysore, where I got really tired. And I realized that there was a huge amount of wind blowing me back. So I stopped, tried to find a bus which would take me and my bicycle back to Bangalore.
What do you look in a designer? Attitude or aptitude?
Attitude.
Okay. And what's your favorite interview question for a designer?
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
That always works. We'll do a lot of that today, Rahul.
Yes. Your favorite serif font and one sans serif font.
Bodoni and Din.
And I have to say, like, we should have said typeface, not font Kedar. Right?
Yes. I'm so sorry.
I
about
carefully
that.
avoided saying anything.
I knew
But-
you noticed, Rahul.
Yes. What's a deal breaker for you while taking a project?
Not having an aligned client where, not having a client who's aligned with allowing us to have influence on the final outcome.
And how did obvious was so obvious? I mean, like, it occurred to me when I was recommending few of my people in the network that you can go to obvious and you can go to obvious, like, obviously obvious. So how did that name come about? Is there a backstory?
Well, yeah, I think the backstory, well, it's long, we don't have enough time, but
Yeah.
I think that, the best design, you look at it completely obvious in hindsight, right? Never when you're at the starting line, right? And beyond that, I think I want obvious as a company or as a studio or agency or whatever you want to call it. I want it to be, the only choice for anybody trying to do anything on the internet in 2021.
Great. All right. I think that was the rapid fire round. Abhinit, you want to just take a shot at like circling back to the notes that you made from this round?
Sure. So, yeah, Rahul, we'll start with going back, right? So, this series is obviously about designers and hiring designers, right? So, could you take us back to the moment when you had to hire a designer for the first time, or more importantly, when hiring became the top of mind, biggest challenge for you? Was there a moment when this happened?
I think hiring is a constant problem, right? And, it's going to be, I firmly believe that my colleagues are the biggest moat that we have against anyone else, right? And in fact, possibly the only moat that we have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, hiring is I think that many other studios will resonate with this, but there's a huge number of people who want to do things on the internet today, right? Who are starting companies, who, are hearing about this word product or design for the first time.
Yep.
And, reaching out to different organizations. And on the other hand, right, a supply or, on the other side of the equation, there's a limited number of people who are excellent at their craft, thoughtful, right? And deeply motivated to do excellent work every single day. And they're spoiled for choice, right? They can work anywhere. So I think every single day, this is one of the first things on my mind, right? How can we make working at Obvious attractive? And how can we, be innovative in the way that we reach out and find people in the world?
Sure. That was going to be my follow-up about how do you actually plan sourcing designers, or how do you think about where to find designers, or how do you reach out to them and tell them, hey, Obvious is hiring and Obvious exists? And has that changed over the years?
Yeah, I think that, it's changed hugely, right? The way that we look at it. I think firstly, right, you're setting yourself up for failure if you sort of start thinking about where to find designers when you need them, right? You have to build your networks and, the awareness of your own company well in advance, right? Mm-hmm. And so even when we're not hiring, we're hiring in some sense, right? So how do you make sure that you're known as a place which is attractive on whatever aspect, right? On the aspect of finances, on the aspect of craft, on the aspect of the choice of kinds of work, mentorship, what have you, right?
Sure.
So we spend a lot of effort thinking about how we can be competitive as a, tiny bootstrapped business rather than a funded company. And so I think that, what we spend a lot of effort versus, seeking particular places to hire from is saying, how can we become a bigger and better magnet for talent constantly? And then, create the right kinds of filters which ensure that people who are aligned with the kind of studio we want to be are then, drawn to it and then come in, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of how we look at talent. Apart from that, of course, I think all the regular things, right? We have design schools,
Yeah.
we have a sort of a white list of other product companies and other agencies, which are, good places to talk to. I think Twitter is the new LinkedIn. That's
Yep.
where we've been, that's where we've been remarkably successful at finding people. And I think there are lots of new kinds of spaces where designers congregate today. And I think there is that meta community which is being built today, right? Whether it's on Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse or where have you. And then, it's just a matter of being present there at regular set cadences.
Sure.
Interesting. But so the question is then, what sort of incentives are in place to be that sort of a magnet? Because these days you have the ESOP model and multiple types of ways to retain or at least like attract talent for MNCs and startups. So is there any differentiator that you can highlight which gets you the talent?
Sure. So I look at incentives almost like a Maslow's hierarchy of incentives, right? There are, foundational stages which you have to take care of before you can start talking about the other stages, right? And today the reality is that if you're not able to, you have to be able to get to at least, let's say, 80% of what everybody else is able to pay, right? 80-85%. That's a minimum baseline. I think, this is a very different situation from 10-15 years ago, where, people were just glad to have a job, right? Today, especially engineers, designers, people in the sort of startup product ecosystem know about opportunities, know about the possibilities, etc. So the first thing that you have to do is to make sure that you're paying well and that your compensation strategy is competitive, transparent, and sort of equitable, right? So that's at a baseline. How do we compete, right? Because we are very much a David amongst the Goliaths in some sense. So I think honestly, one way to win the game is not to play it in some sense.
Sure.
So, but apart from that, right? I think one of the things that's nice about where we are at is that we can really emphasize craft, right? And really say that, hey, listen, do you want to be really, really good at what you do? Do you want a space which encourages you to do that and rewards you for doing that? Obvious is that space, right?
Yeah.
The second thing, and this is sort of for me at least, it was a bit of a eye opener. I didn't realize this until somebody on my team pointed it out to me. They'd come in from India's biggest food delivery company, right, without naming names. And she told me, she's like, it's crazy. Here I have a bigger team of designers, peers, and colleagues who I can learn from and give me great feedback than I did at this company which has raised $3 billion, $4 billion, right?
Yep.
So I think that as a studio, you can be much larger than a product company's design team because you're working on many different things. And not just that, you often have a greater homogeneity of levels because you often don't have sort of a very wide pyramid of executors versus design leaders. We at least want to have people who are able to hold their own when they go and consult within any of these large companies, right? So you get that benefit of multiple perspectives, tons of feedback, and sort of people not afraid to sort of call you out on any aspect of the work that you do, right? Then the obvious thing is just the range of work, right? One team is working on how do you make a complex field like insurance really, really simple, right? How do you figure out how to combat vaccine hesitancy? Or somebody else is doing a project on how do you make driver partners or rider partners earn more money, right? So this is all happening simultaneously, and these all change every 9, 12, 15 months, right? So you get that huge range, right? Like we have literally seen every single wave of whatever, anything that has tech as a suffix, right? EduTech, FinTech, healthcare tech, milk tech, grocery tech, whatever there is, right? We've seen them all, and we've probably designed one of those applications, right? So you can work on any of those things. I think the last thing is just, and this is where we have a little bit of an advantage over just a space for designers, right? Where we anchor hugely on the ability to influence outcomes, right? Because we're being brought in specifically to change outcomes. We are, encouraged to and rewarded for being able to drive multiples of outcomes, right? Not just the craft. So for us, the craft is the base. So that's the core of what we do, but influencing outcomes is the end game. So I think those are some of the things that we emphasize when, as a incentive to join us.
Yeah. But traditionally, if I may call agency, they were not considered as outcome kind of model. They're mostly like yellow Figma files, yellow sketch files. And then, so you want to just briefly tell us how did you manage to see the entire cycle and not just act as an agency? Abhinit, if that's not digressing from the
It's
topic.
not, nothing is digressing here. So let it flow.
Yes.
Sure. I mean, so maybe, I don't know where this comes from, honestly, right? Like maybe it's just the fact that I'm sort of a self-taught designer. So I've never been sure of what the boundaries of this field are, right? Where does A end and where does B begin, right? Yeah. So for instance, a lot of people, and even today, honestly, right? I have no idea what the difference between UX, UI, product, motion, visual designers are. Right?
I'll come to that later. Yeah.
Product designers, whatever, right? Like there are plenty of titles.
13 as of now.
13. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm glad you made it.
I just now got to know there's something called as prototyper. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's great, right? I think it's great that there's, this specialization as well. But I've always been just really, really interested in seeing our work out in people's hands, right? For the longest time, our website has been really, really terrible. Mostly because I was anchoring the effort to actually design it, right? So what I would say often in sales calls is that our portfolio, it's on your phone, right? It's not on our website. And I think for me, that's the most exciting thing, right? To see our work out in the world and to see it actually influencing something, what I call the bits to atoms journey, right? How are, these digital pieces, how are those moving things in the real world, right? So that for me is the most interesting thing. And I think we've just drawn people who are similarly oriented around that.
I love the focus on craft. I think that's a message I see again and again from everything you folks do. And it's clearly visible. And something resonated, Rahul, like a lot of designers I meet, this is a common thing across industry. Like as you grow for, higher and higher, people expect you to let go of more and more of the craft stuff. Right. You saying that, I can totally understand that in an agency, that's less of a demand, right? But the scale that you're at, and I'm sure you're thinking of growing obvious further, do you think it's the scale that at some point will make it unavoidable to demand the same of some of your designers? Does this worry you?
Well, so, it's very possible to look around in the world and see ways in which you should be. Right? Mm-hmm. Ways in which an agency should be structured, ways in which, and whatever, right? Like UX designer should stick in to her lane or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And I think we, every 2 years, right? I don't know whether it's just because as designers, we are a sort of a reflexive bunch, right? We're constantly navel gazing, etc.
Yep.
But we constantly go back and say, hey, listen, are we having fun still, right? That's constantly like a North Star that we have up. And I think, the most fun I've had are when it's, small autonomous teams which are empowered to go out and do something, right? And aren't worried about, hey, listen, no, that's the engineer's job, or no, that's the support guy's job, right?
Yep.
I remember, one time getting so frustrated with this Android engineer that I was working with at my clients that I, just ended up going in and figuring out how to write Android layouts and build the thing that I wanted to see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or, just the understanding that design does not end at the screen, right? The experience or the quality of, say, the interaction that somebody has with your support or, with your customer support is as much a determinant of how somebody perceives and remembers your brand as it is with, that shiny logo redesign that you did last week, right? Yeah. And so are you, I think just constantly anchoring around these, right? Small teams, how can we create a structure which scales, which allows for people to continue to have these small teams, right? Where you're able to have really authentic, honest relationships with, maybe 5 or 6 people whom you're working with. And, within this really tight-knit team, can you go out and do something really magical, right? And I've been surprised so much by how much a tiny team can, do, right? You talk about these billion-dollar companies, and, there's 6 people within that who drove like a ridiculously outsized result, right?
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. I can keep pulling threads out of that. But Kedar.
Yeah.
No, you wanted
I
to
think
ask
I didn't
about
answer. I think there was one question you didn't answer, right? About the IC versus manager sort of thing, right?
No, I was just saying, like, does that worry you? Because I see a lack of ICs in general, right? When I look around, and it's not just India, right? Like, even when I talk to designers in the West, everybody's kind of mourning the fact that, you at one point you have to kind of give up craft like that's, and it's not just design also, it's engineering as well, right? So I think you answered it in a way, by sticking to smaller teams, you negate the need for that manager.
I mean, I think that, I'm probably misquoting, right? But I think Warren Buffett says, right? Show me the incentives and I will tell you the outcomes, right?
Sure.
And so, your system is merely a reflection of the incentives that you structure it with. We've been very, very careful to say that, hey, listen, we want to be able to enable growth as a craftsperson. And, that should not be capped at a point and beyond which you have to move into management. So we have a sort of a parallel IC management track, probably very similar to what you do.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just a reflection of, what your business needs and what you believe in as a sort of a philosophy, right? Yeah.
We've talked to some people in this series in the past where some people also shared the fact that, the business also in general, these days at least, doesn't seem to need a lot of craft. They seem to need a lot of movement in other areas more than, they need excellence in, say, their typography or excellence in the interactivity of their product. Is that something you've seen? Like, because in my experience, right, and you'll remember this because you've been around for that long, when we were back in the days when we were making apps which were sold on App Store for $5 a piece, right? And when you were making those apps, your $5 app had to be better than any other $5 app on the App Store, right? The transition from that to now app as a conduit for a service, right? Do you think, and I'm sorry for putting words in your head, but do you think that transition has not been so kind of craft required in building software?
Well, actually, I think that one thing that's, it's very easy to do back in my day, everything was great and all of that, right? But one of the things I genuinely believe is that we've seen huge growth, right? Just in the size of our industry and the intersects that it now has with all pieces of the real world, right? The physical and digital worlds are now, I would say, probably inextricably intermingled, right?
Yep.
And so you're going to see a lot of tons of different kinds of designers as well, right? You're going to see like a huge demand for people who can basically build tons and tons of CRUD apps, right?
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I think it's great, right? Somebody who can use Balsamiq and, possibly has never heard of Figma or Sketch can call themselves a designer. And I say more power to that person, right? At the same time, I do believe that the world becoming larger, right? The ponds becoming larger, becoming, lakes, becoming oceans, means that there is space for that greater depth in craft as well, right? Is it going to be rewarded for doing the same things that we did 10 years ago? Possibly not, right? You may find that, to have a deep craftsperson role, you need a particular kind of infrastructure. You need to be at a certain kind of company, et cetera, right? But I think it's also, Apple is no longer the place where you go to, let's say, you are at the top of your field. You no longer just need to go there.
Yep.
There are, 20 companies. And the best thing is that, they're not all in the US, right? They're in China, they're in India, they're all over the world. And so I think that, sort of this expansion of opportunities offers greater depth for craftspeople to sort of explore. I think the real thing is that for a good craftsperson, unfortunately, now not unfortunately, but they can be really, really well rewarded now. and, in being leadership, right? So
Sure.
that's a sort of a personal choice that we all have had to make at some point in time, I'm guessing, right? So we've said, oh, I could be, messing around with type, and I could be being paid probably better than I was earlier.
Yeah.
But now I'm being paid so much more if I make sure that, my company hits certain OKRs.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, to Abhineet, what you mentioned, I remember one AudioGAN episode with March T, I believe.
Yeah.
So like I asked the same question to them, that you guys are just building or making t-shirts. It's so good in quality. Is it because of the scale, or like tomorrow if you have like a complete lineup of clothing or whatever accessories and stuff like that, do you think that you'll maintain the same quality?
Yeah.
To that, I think I had a very nice, like those guys had a very nice answer, was that if you give time, I think the people who are actually shipping, if you train them correctly and give adequate time, you can have both. You can have scale, but it's just the function of time also, I think. So I don't know whether that's connecting anywhere, but I thought I'll just
It does.
Yes.
So Studio March, for those who know, Studio March used to be a software
Yes.
design and software consultancy, and they used to be a client of mine.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say anything, but what Rahul said, like, the pain in the ass clients are the best clients. I had a lot of debates and fights with those guys, but I ended up doing some of the best work that I've ever done with those people. Yeah.
Cool. Just coming back to the main topic, we took a small tangent, but yeah. So Rahul, like you mentioned about attracting talent, and so just if you can give some, actually not some, but maybe like top 3 qualities that you look in a designer while hiring, or even for that matter, while asking a particular designer in your team to work on a particular project. Both ways, if you can just, how do you evaluate those things?
Sure. I think, one sort of side effect of, like I said, right, the explosion of design opportunities and of this industry is that there's lots of people who are coming into it, right? And which I long-term think is a great thing. At the same time, you do have to, how do you filter, right, for the kinds of people that you want, right?
Yeah.
So I think we look for, and, at a very, very broad level, is this somebody who's here because it's exciting way to make more money, right? Or it's a profession? Or how do you filter for somebody for whom this is their calling in some sense, right? Apart from that, yeah, I think, how do you find people with a certain degree of honesty, right? I think there's so many people who are like, yes, we know exactly what, we know how to do this, or, we know the answer to this. Yeah. That, finding people who have the humility / honesty to say, I'm not sure, or I don't know, but, I'm going to figure this out. I think that's a great characteristic that we look for, right? Apart from that, yeah, just how do you filter for work ethic, right? The completeness of a solution, sort of the intellectual curiosity that's pushed somebody to think through an entire, range of scenarios. And then, just that polish, right? I don't want to see 300 screens, but, if I can see a screen or two, or, just a solution or whatever it is, right? Like maybe, insight that's been harvested from research, right? Which sort of shines, right? That comes across, right? And I think those are the things that I would want to see regularly, right? And that stands out. You can sort of spot that from a mile off.
Yeah, very interesting. One thing I'm going to give myself a credit of this series is that my hiring skills have definitely improved. I've been reflecting on it, and I've been hiring in my current profile, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it has just helped me articulate what I've been doing, but just sort of a bit better and more structured way of evaluating people. Yeah.
So Rahul, out of those things that you mentioned, which one do you think is rarest, to kind of get hold of? Like, which is the one thing you think you have the highest failure rate on? That I get everything else, but this one thing, very few people have it.
I think that, so, if I were to add to that, I would say, design unicorns, right? We want those, right? Yeah. People who can, but I mean, let's leave that aside because that's stupid, actually. I think that, the ability to find somebody who is great at valuing their own work and who remains honest and, has that sort of ability to question themselves, right? I think for me, that's, like if we get 100, whatever, candidates or whatever, that's the thing which is possibly hardest to find. right?
Yep. Okay, fair enough.
Interesting.
What is it for you?
What's it for me? I think, Rahul, comfort with ambiguity, right? Like that's one thing that, it's not just that it's difficult to find, but I struggle with, that's one of the things I can't see from a mile away, right? It takes me a lot of prodding and questioning and a lot of conversations to figure out, like, does this person, listen to the problem, falls for the problem, that, oh, I like this problem, and do they fall for it enough that they'll be able to figure their way, out of it? That's really hard, because everything else being equal, sometimes, people have, some people are just more comfortable with everything, being decided, right? So for
Yeah.
example, like for most products it works, but sometimes you have product design problems where you have to find out what will work for the customer, right? It's not clear, like the product market fit isn't there, right? And the team is
Yeah.
trying to figure out what will work. So there are very few designers, I feel, and this thing is very hard to judge as well.
Cool. And this is more of a tactical question, but just I hope that like people from different experience backgrounds listen to this. So just to understand your bit also, that what do you look in a portfolio as well? I mean, the thing which you said that it shines, right? Um, so I don't want to be very specific about the question, but yeah, it generally you get a feel, right? So is it just Behance page, just posters? Is it like great animation on Dribble, or is it like a Medium post? Any preference or any insights from different types of evaluating portfolios?
Well, I mean, honestly, the platform is for me a smaller consideration. The kind of work will depend on what role we're hiring for, right? If I'm hoping to find, a great motion designer, then, of course, I want to see a range of the work that they have done. If I'm looking for an illustrator, then I want to see like a range of their, maybe, their work, or, types of styles that they have, right? Or I want to see, how comfortable they are with metaphor and how they've translated a brief, etc. If I'm looking for, somebody who is heavier on, let's say, research, then, perhaps I want to see an articulation of, let's say, the problem first and then the solution. I think within portfolios, one thing is, I think the unfortunate reality is that it's impossible to go through like 20 projects, right? As for somebody who's hiring, right? And I would give much, much heavier weightage to, like I've seen some fantastic designers who've literally had one case study, right? And that was enough, right?
Yep.
So I would say that it's great that, there's this range that you have. You need to edit, right? As a designer, right? That's the biggest thing, right? In the same way that, what is common to every photograph, the frame, right? So you need to edit yourself very, very strongly. I think that within that, how do you put your best foot forward, right? Have you made sure that, you have to be very careful, right? If you're applying as a generalist, right? Then I want to be able to see that you've done a little bit of understanding of the problem. I want to see that you've thought of multiple perhaps options. I want to see how you've validated maybe some of the solutions that you've put together. And then once you've zeroed in on one, I want to see how you've translated that into, a visual outcome, right? If you're a researcher, then, I don't care about, then don't, try and spend effort on the visual outcome, right? I'm not going to be evaluating you on that basis at all. But then show me, show me your working really, right? So I think that there are those two things. And the other part is, yes, care about the production value of your work, right? Now, that does not mean that yours has to be, the best visual piece, but tons of small things, those tons of paper cuts which kill a portfolio, right? You have badly edited images all over. Have you left, placeholder text in places? Have your mockups, did you use the ones that, you used one which has, some imagery which is not relevant, or you've got spelling mistakes all over, right? Now, each of those individually is not a deal breaker, but it does show that attention to detail, right?
Yeah.
So can you share this with, your peers? Can you make sure that you get feedback before you send it in? And the other part is just accessibility, right? Now, so often I have been sent like a link to somebody's website where, it doesn't work, or, you need a password, and then I have to email them saying, hey, listen, I can't open your case study. So think through the user experience of the person who's evaluating your portfolio a little bit as well, right? I think for me, those are two things. And I think the other part is, regardless of where you are at, right? Can you bring in a little bit of, sure, you're a fantastic illustrator, you're a great motion designer, but give me a little bit of a story, right?
Sure.
3 lines. That's it, right? Tell me about the brief. Tell me about the constraints here. Tell me about, you did this in 15 minutes or this took you 15 hours, right? Give me a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, as it were.
Beautiful.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, that was a really good insight into what you look for in designers. And
Abhineet, before we jump next, let's take a quick break. Intel vPro provides the complete manageability tools to detect, repair, and protect your devices remotely, so your workforce can keep doing what they do best wherever they are working from. Today, as most employees and IT teams no longer work under the same roof, fixing glitchy PCs and proactively managing the PC fleet has become increasingly difficult. The Intel vPro platform addresses these problems with its Intel Active Management technology, Intel AMT. vPro enables IT to keep mission-critical resources running by establishing a secure connection between IT and Intel vPro platform-based PC. In the event of a cyber attack, Intel IMT lets IT remotely manage and repair systems simultaneously, even if they are dispersed across multiple locations. PCs can be recovered quickly wherever they may be. Plus, the Intel Endpoint Management Assistant, Intel EMA, enables cloud-based manageability using simple web-based tools to connect with and remediate any Intel vPro platform-based PC. Both these tools provide better manageability and faster response time, resulting in a sustainable device management, support cost savings, and fewer help desk tickets. Visit www.intel.in/IT-heroes to know more. Intel vPro, built for business. And welcome back to the show.
so taking on, I think we have to touch, Rahul, on the, you briefly mentioned Design Unicorn and you said, let's leave it aside. We are not the kind of show who will leave things aside. Plus, this was on our agenda anyways. We've been talking about generalist specialists for some time. So let's dive there. Like, this has been a raging debate for the longest time. I've heard arguments on both sides. There's this book, I don't know if you folks are familiar with it. It's called Range. And its subtitle is Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World, or something like that. So Obviously, it's clear what stance it takes. Then I've talked to designers who basically said that, you know what, like this design unicorn thing, it's almost like exploitation in some ways, right? Because you do this also, you do that also. Can you do that also, right? And it barely leaves any room for a designer to really master one of the areas of what design is. Where do you stand here? And if you want to avoid the whole, taking stand thing, then maybe you could talk a little bit about what role does this play in when when you're running Obvious and you obviously have different kind of projects coming in. How do you think about this? Do we need a designer with a generalist skill set? When do you hire a specialist? Sorry if it's too broad.
No, and I want to make it a bit uncomfortable also. If you can tell us, like, how do you defend or do you advocate the T-shaped designer philosophy?
Well, yeah, I think I'm happy to wade into the debate, right? I think that not an uncomfortable conversation necessarily, but a tool for each different problem that's thrown at you in some sense, right? Is my answer. When do generalists succeed? When do specialists succeed, right?
Yep.
There's different points at which they will each succeed. That will depend on the shape of the industry, that, the stage of company, their own career goals, right? Honestly, one way to look at it is from the company's perspective, right? That I need X, right? And I need this person to do this one really narrow thing. Or, hey, listen, everything's on fire. I just need anybody who can lift a bucket of water, right? That's good enough.
Yep.
Now, the other way to look at it is also from what does the individual want, right? And today, I believe that there exists wide ranges of possibilities, right? I think possibly the only controversial thing I might say is that maybe the debate started because the specialists, I mean, if you're a specialist, you have to be good at what you do.
Yes, that's kind of a given. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's really important, right? And also finding the right place for yourself, right? Are you finding fulfillment in your work? And can you find a place that rewards it, right? So sort of that sort of ikigai kind of philosophy for yourself, right?
Yep.
Yes, I think that, in today's world, like I said, right, our industry is in a sort of stage of hyper growth, right? It isn't an industry which has had a lot of time to settle down, to find out, that this is growing slowly but steadily, etc. Right?
Yep.
So I think that there's greater mobility options for generalists, right? That's for sure. And similar to the way in which at one point all engineers wanted to become product managers, wanted to become CEOs, right?
Yep.
Now you have designers who've seen that that's a great path to influence and of course finance, reward, let's say.
Yep.
Right? So I know tons of designers who want to become product owners, product managers, whatever they're called.
Yep.
And then, I actually think I would love to see many more designers become CEOs and run their own businesses. Right?
Oh, same here, right? Like this is what I say every time somebody asks me about ESOPs, and I'm like, there should be wealth creation, and I want designers to be beneficiaries, and I want more designers to start companies, right? Like, so sorry to cut you off, but please continue.
Absolutely. Yeah, praise, brother, praise that. So yeah, and then where can specialists exist, right? And the other thing to look at, right, is that our industry is also constantly being cannibalized from the bottom by tools, right?
Yes.
So I think that's one thing to be very cognizant of, right? Today, anybody with a Canva subscription can be a print designer. Right?
Yep.
Today, anybody with a Squarespace account is a website designer, potentially an e-commerce designer. I'm sure that, there's tools for mobile apps and so on, right?
Yeah.
So, if you are a specialist, right, you do have to know, where to pick your battles, right? If you're a type designer or you have a deep interest in typography, right?
Yep.
It's harder to justify today spending weeks and months on selecting a typeface for your mobile app when Google Fonts allows you to compare 300 of them at the same time, more or less, right? Or like Google famously did put out 42 different variations and let the algorithm choose, right?
Yeah, the 50 shades of blue experiment.
There you go.
Sorry. Bad habit of interruption. So please continue.
No, that's pain and pleasure in the same coin, as it were.
Yeah.
So, I think that you do have to figure out, okay, now, how do I make sure that I do my best craft? And how do I make sure that I'm rewarded for doing that, right? I may not have a role maybe the best role for me is not within a fast moving startup, but it's within a place that actually values that skill set deeply and where, the application of my skill set can create business outcomes that make sense, right?
Yeah, like how many companies really need a new typeface built in this age, right? We can cry all we want about we don't have a lot of type designers around. But yeah, people like the need is going down. And tools, that's really a nice point. It is happening. I just saw Flutter Flow the other day. It's basically Webflow for Flutter, and first version, pretty good quality. Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, technology is coming for our jobs, right? And that's a good thing.
Yep.
But just expanding on that, right?
Yeah.
There's huge opportunities, once we expand it, right? So for instance, one of my favorite type designers has spent a lot of her time over the last few years designing non-English scripts, right?
Yep.
Designing scripts for Indic languages, right? And, that kind of thing is valued, right? So I think there are opportunities once you stop just looking at, okay, do I have a role at wherever, right? Whatever startup flavor of the month is.
Yeah. I was just going to say the same thing to Abhineet, that how many companies are there who might need like a custom typeface, but yeah, I'm sure that answer will be very low. But in the Indian ecosystem, definitely like Ektype, the foundry who specializes in Devanagari and much more regional scripts. Like if you look at their work and if you speak to them, I've done interview with Nupur Date, who's a founder there. And if you look at ITF or any other foundries who are doing Devanagari scripts especially, yeah, the core anatomy of all the fonts on Google for regional, the anatomy is the same. So they're just making like small changes to like some small Bezier curves here and there, or whatever, like some teardrop in a different way, but the anatomy still remains the same. So if you look at the fonts which the typefaces which are done by Ektype, you'll see complete radical shift in their offerings. So if you go at that, then that's like a different level of specialization altogether. Yeah.
And it's not just about need also, Kedar. It's need, maybe a lot of people need, but how many people are gonna get business value out of it? Right. That I think is harder, because we can point at a company and say, yeah, you need a custom typeface, but business value, right? That's becoming rarer and rarer. Like even in type, like there's dynamic typefaces coming now, right? No fonts, just numbers. Just vary and you'll get infinite variations. So I think that's a lot of things happening at the same time, and sometimes certain specializations just go out of fashion. I think we have to accept that also.
पता नहीं यार, मतलब I don't know where this is heading, but interesting space to delve into. But ये business value, what do you mean? क्योंकि I asked this guy कि you're making like the first Odia font, and what is it helping? Who is it helping? Is it making business? And he said, यार Odisha में books छप रहे. So then what you said ना कि designers should make more money and then eventually become CEOs. That if you extrapolate the same concept here, they're getting educated and maybe tomorrow they will become designers. So it depends on like what is the time frame you're looking at for the value also.
Yeah, like, and just building on that, I think one of the things that's I'm seeing as a trend is that many specialists are choosing not to be employed by a single place, right?
Yep.
I don't know what it's not. I think the infrastructure for working independently has improved significantly. People are more comfortable with it. I think that, the idea that, you don't have to be employed by a large company or even a startup, that you can make, an excellent life for yourself while remaining independent is gaining a lot of traction, right? In the same way that, we went from, society only valuing you if you had a government job to, an MNC job to, Infosys to startup to perhaps the future is, somebody who deeply cares about their craft, splitting their time across many, many different spaces. And I see that happening for a lot of designers, right? As we get more creative with ways of payment, with, the way to actually reward people or creators. So I think that's really exciting there.
Yeah, very true. I think we'll change gears a bit because
we are far from our main thread.
Yes, but yeah, we'll change gears and come to the main track again, or main lane again, which is so being an independent studio, being an independent setup. And I've seen you talking about gender diversity, and in fact, it comes across that it's a important thing to be discussed or at least addressed. So, is there anything which you guys consciously do to maintain diversity in general, or it's also important? Like we were having a chat with Vasudha, and she said that 5 white men. What was it, Avinash?
5 white men sitting together drinking brandy.
Drinking scotch.
Drinking scotch.
Yeah. So that drives a different kind of outcome, and so on and so forth. So you have any insights there which you would like to share?
Sure. I keep thinking about, or rather, we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how can we build a company which is better representative of the world that we exist within, right? That's for me is kind of how we define diversity, right? I think it's a fancy way of saying, hey, listen, this is what the world looks like. Why does your company look like a very small subset of that world, right? And I think that, we've been lucky enough that, all the products that we work on go out to what we call country scale populations, right? They go out to not, millions of people, but hundreds of millions of people. Right?
Yep.
And I think, all of us actually have had the privilege of working on similar kinds of things. And I firmly believe that if you're building for the world, then your company has to be representative of that world. Right? It's a very simple calculus for me in some sense. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, how do you make sure? Now, obviously, that isn't the case in companies today, right?
Yeah.
They don't look like the world. And depending on what lens you look at, there are different kinds of or different facets of diversity, right? Gender is, of course, the most visible and the first one that most organizations go after. But there are so many others, right? Ability is on a spectrum. There are people who may not be able to see, there may people who may not be able to, climb stairs, whatever, right? There's
or
a
speak
range.
English.
Exactly, right? There's, tons of things, right? Orientation, sexuality, gender, caste in India, race, so on and so forth, right? Now, in the industry that we're part of, I was told, I think I looked at some study and that, we're an industry which is 92% male, right? And has, 7% women in that, right? So that for me was a really like an eye opener because at least with
this is in India or across the world?
Globally. And I think India is slightly worse than that, right? Yes, it's 93% or something like that. I think this was, if I remember correctly, Stack Overflow does an annual survey of developers.
Yeah.
And this was based on some of those numbers, if I remember correctly. Right? And, we started off like that, right?
Yeah.
Founders of Obvious, we were all men. We were all within 2 or 3 years of each other. We mostly came from, a similar socioeconomic background, watched the same TV when we were growing up, etc., right? And I think for us, it's been a process. Today, I'm pretty happy that, actually, I think just 2 months ago, somebody told me, Monica, who leads our people stuff, said, hey, listen, there are now more women in Obvious than there are men, right? And for me, that was great, right? We've at least worked on this aspect of things and done decently. And what's actually I'm more happy about is that 70% of our leadership is now women, right? So I think our whole direction, the way in which we look at policy, all of those things changes completely. And more importantly, right, the way in which we build products changes completely, right? And I think that's most exciting.
That's so rare, Rahul. It just feels good to hear it.
Yes, definitely, Anne.
I mean, honestly, I think, you were talking about what are the things that would bring people to work at Obvious, right?
Yeah.
We've identified that, people talk about this being a priority externally, but, I don't know if that's backed by as much action as talk. And so we've identified that this is an area where, we believe we can build a more resilient, a stronger business if we focus on diversity as a key sort of principle of company building.
Yeah, and I think as a design agency, I think it's for a designer, it's I think doubly important. Not to say it's not important for everyone, but this profession, we all talk about participatory design. We all talk about diversity of perspectives being important to the quality of design. So I think for a design team or an agency or a company, I think it has to be there. I would doubt your design skills. Right? If you didn't have diversity in your team and if this was not a top of mind problem for you. But moving on from there, and I'm conscious of the time, so we'll skip a few things and jump straight to the Obvious handbook. That's a really well written piece of document, and thanks for sharing it with the world. Can you please talk about it a little? Right? Was there a moment that solidified your thinking on we need to institute something of this kind, right? What was that moment? What was the problem? And how did it help?
Sure. So I think we started off, as with many things that we do, we started off because, we kind of realized that we'd messed up, right? Nobody knew what anybody else was doing. Nobody knew how certain things were meant to be going. And, I think companies have natural inflection points where those things happen, and we'd reached one of them, right? So it was born out of need and urgency, but we were lucky enough that it had, I think, an outsized impact on us as an organization, honestly. Right? So it possibly started from a very simple thing, I think, and if I remember correctly, right, it actually started with a really, really funny thing, which was that I think we'd grown to about we're still small, but we were, it expanded to about 12 or 15 people, right? So, for me, the metric is, can I seat my entire company around my dining table? And, you stop being able to do that at a certain point. And, this was that point, right? You cannot, at least not around my dining table, you can't seat 15 people, right? So it started off that, we all left the office one day, and I, usually leave at about I was leaving at about 6 or 6:30 or something. Came back the next day, and I realized that the door was wide open, right? And somebody had forgotten to lock it, right? And everything was open. The lights were on. Back then, our most prized possessions were these iMacs that we had, and so on and so forth, right? And we were like, what's going on, right? And then we realized that nobody, it was just sort of common sense earlier that, okay, last person out, and everybody knew, okay, the last person out would have a key and close the door, it's turn off lights, etc. Okay? So we realized that, from that really, silly beginning, we realized that we needed to write down stuff so that everybody knew what was happening, right? You knew everything from who to call when the internet went down to how do you run a design sprint to how do you run a one-on-one, right? So all of those different things, because all of those break in sort of similar ways to, the destructive potential of a door left unlocked, right?
Yeah.
And the things that you value, right? Back then it was your iMacs. Today it's probably, people and culture and, some of the principles. All of those can be stolen very easily if you don't have a shared understanding of how those need to be performed or practiced, right?
Sure.
So I think it emerged out of that. There was a period where I decided, okay, I'm not going to do any client work. And I spent 2 months writing every single thing down that I could think of, right?
Yeah.
And, so that's why it has a lot of very transactional stuff, right? Like, when is a holiday to, how do you get paid? Or, a few years ago, we had an office where we had lots of cats. So where's the cat food kept, right? And so on and so forth. To today, how do we make sure that everybody who joins Obvious, has a similar and good experience when they join, and their first 30, 60, 90 days are good for the person. They have, expectations set well, etc., right? And I think that, we then said, hey, listen, we need to be, and, internally we call this being public by default, right? And I think increasingly the way that I look at it is, there's the map and there's territory, right? And the map is not the territory, right?
Yeah.
But how could you, with the right set of tools, make the territory and the map the same, right? So can you actually work, and can your site of work be documentation simultaneously, right? So that's something that we also strive to do, right? Do you have to document your design separately, and is your Figma file separate, right? Or is there that sense of unity and cohesion throughout, right? So I think, and, honestly, it's constantly things that we are rethinking, and we're, shifting tools from one thing to the other, et cetera. But we're constantly saying, okay, can this be better? Because we always find things that break, et cetera. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. That brings back so many memories. I remember back at Left Shift, our first playbook was written when we realized that our library suddenly had no books, right? And the document started with everything runs on trust, right? And then we had to write down that, please keep the books. And they hadn't gone anywhere, right?
Sure.
They were just all over the office, right? And we were like, okay, we need some rules. But it's the tiny things which spark, documentation. And similarly at Gojek, I actually did the equivalent of getting a bigger dining table, or tried to, for a long time before I realized it won't fail. I need something else. And that's how we ended up documenting the career ladders and all. I also remember my conversation with Dhruv one time at Gojek regarding this. Cool. Kedar?
Yes, I think we are done with most of the questions that we had thought of. But just to conclude, Rahul, you don't come from which is a great thing to have, that you don't come from a design school background. I have my certain thoughts around it, but I would like to know your perspective of maybe sharing pros and cons of not coming from a design background, and we can wrap it up.
Yeah, I think this is one of those, questions that designers love to sort of talk about endlessly, right? And I'm no exception. I think, before going into the specifics, I think that, the self-taught versus the design school, they each overvalue the other experience and simultaneously, undervalue it in some sense, right? And that, paradox is what everything else is built on. So, it's a sort of it's a castle built on very, very shaky foundations, the whole argument itself. If I were to make some very broad generalizations, I think that, you see a tremendous process focus on people who've gone through design school, and that's something they have to unlearn. And equally, right, you see a strong outcome focus on the non-design school folks, and that's something they have to unlearn, right? So there is that meeting point in the middle, right? Yeah, I've sort of been lucky enough that my co-founder has enough design degrees for the both of us. He has he collects design degrees, in the same way that the rest of us can collect pencils or notebooks and so on. But yeah, I think that the other part that I've seen, people who've gone through a particular kind of design school, and this is also changing, right? We're getting new kinds of design schools today. You're getting boot camps, you're getting cohort based groups or whatever it is. You're getting education at different levels, right? For people who are already in the industry and who are looking to either grow in their craft or move into leadership. And like I said, right, I think that's part of that broader phenomena of the entire industry growing much, much larger. I think one thing with design school is that you often have, designers who come out of that struggle with the difference between academia and industry, right?
Yeah.
Because those are quite tangential to each other. So there's the idealism, the sort of the initial idealism, which then, meets the pragmatism and, the sort of motivations of a company which is, just raised, X $100 million of money. And on the other side, right, I think the self-taught, and I think I've experienced this myself deeply, that, there's often basics that are shaky, right?
Yeah.
I think that I would have loved to have had a deep dive into typography at some point, right? Since we were speaking about that, or color theory, or 101 other subjects.
Yeah, I miss that every day. Like,
or just the ability to draw. Abhineet, I don't know if you can draw for nuts. I know Kedar is excellent at it.
No, not at all. No.
You're better than both of us put together, I'm assuming. I haven't seen, Rahul, your drawing, so no offense.
Yeah, you're lucky.
I never passed intermediate exam, as in I never dared to attempt it also. But
yeah, but I miss those things. Like when I see people who've gotten that environment where they could work on, they had the luxury of working on fundamentals. Sadly, I was learning computer programming fundamentals, which do come in handy, but I do miss not having time. Like now in my 30s, you'll find myself geeking out on typography, but you don't find time. I wish I'd done this early.
Yeah. I generally have a chat with this Sarang Kulkarni. You know him, Rahul? The Ektype founder?
No, I don't.
So yeah. When I go to their office, they're just playing with like some random typefaces, and I don't know, 1960s mein ye newspaper mein ye dekh ye cut karke, like really geeky stuff. And I wish sometimes I'll just do internship here and I'll join you guys. I'll quit everything. And he said, first, better don't learn font design or type design. Learn typography. That will be much more helpful. तो है मतलब कितने एज के बाद क्या कर सकते हो उसके लिए भी like थोड़ा सा I would say need more insights. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Rahul, for giving your time. It was real like pleasure to have you. A lot of food for thought and a lot of insights. Thank you for sharing. And Abhineet, we'll catch up soon again. So on the ending note, I have a small plug. So thanks for listening till the end. Currently, I'm heading the design at Jupiter.money, and we are hiring at all levels. So visit jupiter.money/careers. You can also follow AudioGAN on Instagram at AudioGAN Moments or visit audiogan.com for more GAN sessions. You guys want to plug anything?
Guests first.
Well, No, I'm good.
Obvious isn't hiring right now?
We're always hiring.
Okay.
I look forward to colleagues who challenge and make me think more creatively. So do look at our website for more information.
Superb. And I'll also, since Dhruv was also planning to join us, we'll just give a shout out to him. Hey Dhruv, we'll have both of you next time again. Vineet?
Yep. I design at Gojek. We do hire from time to time. Follow us on Twitter at Gojek Design. And yeah, feel free to reach out. And as and when we hire, we'll post updates there.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Kedar. Thanks for being such a great host, both of you. See you soon.
And that's it from today's GYAN session. For show notes and more GYAN, visit audiogyan.com. If you like this podcast, please don't forget to check our other interesting podcast on IVM Network. You can listen to us on IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. To stay tuned, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at IVM Podcast. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at AudioGyan Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.
Hey everybody, it's been a great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast, Aswin, DJ and Varun talk about Virat Kohli's shocking announcement about giving up the Indian T20 and RCB captaincy. And they review the opening match of the IPL between the Mumbai Indians and Chennai Super Kings. On Advertising is Dead, Varun is joined by musicians Hanita Bhambri and Kevin Fernando, along with Arjun Koladi from Spotify to talk about the shifts in the music space. The latest Cadbury ad remix sparks an interesting thought in Siddharth's mind. Is this a hack by advertisers to cut the clutter, or are they running out of content? Join the Simplified gang, Chuck, Naren, Shriketh and Tony as they discuss why all platforms are trying to be like each other. And on Tere Mere Raste, Keshu takes us to a city known as the Rare Desert Oasis, Bikaner. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. It really does help us. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quota, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Intel vPro. Thank you so much for making this possible.
What if you could relive some of the biggest and most public feuds in Indian corporate history?
Peer back through the window of time to see who among HUL or Nirma stood on top.
Or who was more dominant between Tata Motors and Maruti Suzuki?
Tune in with me, Ambi Parmeshwaran,
And me, Anupam Gupta, on Bank of Baroda presents The Last Brand Standing.
where we talk about two brands vying for the top position.
And what their journeys were.
Every Tuesday on the IVM Podcast app or website.
Or wherever you get your podcast from.